HMO Sobbies. It's the trickster. Welcome to 30 with Tony. Don't you know I am the sexiest president that ever lived? There are only two genders and every woman loves me, so hit it, shake it.
Well, hi, Kemosabe's. It's Tony D'Angelo. It is Thursday, July 17th, 3 p.m. Eastern. Welcome to another edition of 30 with Tony. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm so happy for all of the great circulation we've had, all of the messages you've sent, all of the tweets and retweets and suggestions, and I'm incredibly grateful. I'm also very happy for our music contributors today. We've got some Boss Music, and We've also got a classic movie review that we're going to show you, and I it's quite it's quite a boost to me. And anyway, let's get started. What I like to do, please bear with me for just a second, if you will. Sorry, just had to make a technical adjustment. What I like to do is I like to give you something that you might be seeing in the news or on social media or perhaps in conversation, and perhaps give you something that either you don't see or you're not really seeing what's happening because they're not telling you. Now, if you live in a state like Connecticut, which is the state that I live in, they're lying to you all the time, and they hate the truth. People in political positions hate the truth. And that really is right down the line, right down the spectrum. Now, we do have political parties. We do have a Democrat Party, and if you prefer Democratic, and a Republican Party. And the continuing theme, if you will, that you keep hearing is uniparty. And where does this come about? I think it comes about because people see and know and observe and live in a world where the political system's doing one thing and the world's doing something else. And the system, as aided by the state run and oftentimes state supported media, wants to tell you that whatever you're seeing has nothing to do with any sort of reality whatsoever. And it's terrible. It really, truly is terrible. We've got a man who is a United States Senator in this state. His name is Chris Murphy. He is an embarrassment. He is crooked. He is incompetent. He has no sense of logic, reason, analysis, or perspective. But yet he's continually in the Senate. And I have been on the local Republican Party's case to say, why don't you call for his ouster? The entire state, other than the people who are somehow tied to him, wants to see him go. They won't do a blessed thing. They will not do a blessed thing. Why is that? And I think these are questions you have to answer every time a party comes to you with, we've got the right perspective, we've got the hot new candidate, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and nothing ever seems to happen. As a matter of fact, it seems to get worse. So when we approach today's subject, which is really kind of a simple newspaper subject, I want you to think about something. Why is Connecticut always in the economic sewer? Why is Connecticut continually a welfare beggar state? Why is it that the people in political party power, who are the Democrats in this state, are always complaining about the fact that they're not getting enough from their begging? You never hear whatsoever about what can we do to develop things? What can we do to be competitive with other states? What can we do to lower the cost of living? What can we do to lower the cost of energy? You never hear any of that. What you hear is we're not getting enough. And a large part of why they're not getting enough these days, so they claim, is because of Donald Trump and the people in his cabinet and the one big beautiful bill. And that cuts directly into their incompetence and their beggarly mentality. And this is the problem, however. I'm just going to get a sip of tea if you don't mind. This is the problem because when you've weaned and engendered generations of beggars and you cut off the water supply and you say, go work, they don't know how to work. They don't know work. They don't know what work is. They don't know anything about personal responsibility. And the political system has done a marvelous job, largely Democrat, aided by Republicans in many, many cases, to get them to be dependent upon everything. And it's just, I was having this conversation with Bob Swick, actually, Bob Swick and several other people. And we talked about this on the Lee Elsey show this past Tuesday. If you have two political parties and you have nonprofit budgets, and we talked about all the duplications and the fact that if nonprofits in Connecticut were to be evaluated by quote unquote a profit making motive, they would be torched and everybody fired and new efficiencies would take place. But when you have this and two political parties say, oh, we're not going to cut the funding, which is this addiction to money, you got a problem. You've got a problem. Now, I know Lee Elsey says this all the time. How does a politician go to his constituency and say, well, I cut this program? The problem, and everyone's like, oh, you're terrible, you're this, you're that, you don't belong in office. The problem is they're too pig-headed and stupid to articulate to people the savings in the cutting of that program. And how about it? You've got so much money there, you can deliver equivalent or greater services at a less cost. But there's never any thought of that. You just want to sit there and cry the poor mouth. And this is largely what they do. So it's a Democratic symphony with Republican accompaniment, at least in this state. But anyway, we are so bad off in this state. People are increasingly dependent upon free food banks, giveaway food, which by definition means either one of two things. They are either receiving subsidies from the government where they could buy food, tax money, no other place for it to come from, or they are going to food pantries. Now, when that metric is increasing, if you were the governor, anybody in any kind of administrative high role, and you saw the uptick in the fact that people could not afford to buy food, what would that tell you? It would tell you you have no economy. It would tell you you have no development. It would tell you you have no vision. It would tell you you have no place for people to work and for them to buy their own thing. Now, it might be the thing of they're incapable of working. Well, whose problem is that? The system that brought them up, the system that encourages them to screw up continually, so others may get rich off of them. Marijuana, which is a failure because anything Connecticut tries is a failure. The quote unquote housing shortage, read Bob Swick's article this past Saturday on that. But all that being as it is, let us look at really the most critical thing, food. Why are people hungry and what won't Connecticut do to feed its hunger problem? Simple beings today, but blunt truths. Let's go to the newspaper. And here's an article, the CT Mirror. This was last Friday. Connecticut food pantries bracing for federal cuts secure $9 million in state budget. Now, the young lady, I think she's a lady, writing this thing. Her name is Jahava Mundi. Looks like a lady. Can't really tell these days. She does identify as a she. She double majors in government in the College of Letters with a minor in human rights advocacy. She's an editor on the newspaper, and she is very active in social media and a research partner in Wesleyan Center for Prison Education. So I think we could say she is a liberal young lady. I think we can also say that she is one who would be very favorable to shall we say, liberal, if not left-leaning agendas. So consider the article here, written by a young person, very intelligent young person, very thoughtful, in that perspective. Now, and you should do that anytime you read something. Starts off the head note. After lobbying for more state funding, Connecticut's food pantry secured $9 million in the biennium budget passed by lawmakers last month, $3 million for the coming fiscal year, and $6 million in the following year, for more than the annual $850,000 previous budgets have allocated. So we got a problem, Houston. And the problem is the state is reaching into its pocket or the taxpayer's pocket to pay for people that either can't work or don't want to work. And that's not a good thing. But let's talk about the evil feds. But almost before the ink was dry, congressional lawmakers slashed federal funding for food assistance program in their sweeping budget reconciliation bill, which President Donald Trump signed into law. That would have been, I guess that would have been July 4th. So we go here to the president of the Connecticut Food Share, and Jacob Jakubowski. He is the, shall we say, the head of this organization. And right away, he's crying the poor mouth. Now, the federal budget, we'll look at Mr. Jakubowski in a little bit. But let's first, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should just jump to what this particular head of this food share is compensated at. Here's the compensation of Connecticut Food Share. Jacob Jakubowski is making just about all the compensation in this organization, which basically is, for lack of a better term, a handout organization. They get money, they buy food, they give food, they get donations of food, they give food. They distribute the food using more than likely trucks, more than likely box trucks. Now, you've got here Mr. Jakubowski making $291.50, close to, by this thing, and I'm sure it's more than that right now, $350,000 a year. But yet you've got other highly paid, highly compensated executives. The CFO makes probably now about $200,000. The chief development officer, well, what are you developing? What are you developing? More food banks? More hunger? Are you expanding the Connecticut Food Bank to New York? I imagine a development officer tries to get donors to give, but like, how hard do you have to try? Those that will give, and those that don't won't. Making $162,000, Beverly Catchpole. Leonard Kemp, you have a CFO and a chief operations officer. So in other words, Mr. Jakubowski, we'll look at his background in a little bit, is not doing any operations ostensibly, is making 160, the operations officer, close to 180 something thousand dollars a year, 190. The network and program officer, wow, seems like a good place to go if you need a job. $200,000 a year. The people officer, ain't that a cool thing? Used to be called personnel. Later it became human resources. But you're a people officer. We care about people, except if you like Donald Trump, then we don't care about you. Close to $170,000 a year, actually 180. Senior Director of Strategic Giving, $120,300. Well, why do you have a Senior Director of Strategic Giving and a development officer? Ain't that a little interesting? So you've got a lot of compensation in this thing. So the first thing you've got to ask yourself, if you had a brain, if you were responsible for your own resources, if you have a private business, you would say, well, we're not making and getting what we're not. Can we cut anywhere? Can we consolidate? Can we efficientize this organization? But no, they're not going to do that. They will sit there and continually cry for the poor mouth. Now let's look at the history of Mr. Jakubowski. He, big guy at UConn. He is he's a local boy whom they love. he has quote unquote a top workplace award, whatever that means. Honestly, if you're got that much money to throw around, how could you not have a top workplace? And he is generated by the Hartford Courant and Hearst newspapers, fine objective news sources. And Also, he's received the C-Suite Award from the Hartford Business Journal due to the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. No comment. Now, let's look at his work background. Prior to joining Connecticut Food Share, Vice President of External Relations at Hospital for Special Care and Director of Corporate and Community Development at Charter Oak State College. And he has adjunct appointments in University of Connecticut School of Public Policy and Central Connecticut State Department of Political Science. In other words, this guy has done nothing but been on the state nickel. This is the curious thing. He's a graduate of the Harvard Business School Strategic Perspectives and Nonprofit Management Program, whatever in the hell that means. At the age of 21, he was elected to the New Britain City Council, followed by 2 terms as city treasurer. In 2012, he was one of Connecticut's 7 presidential electors for Barack Obama. So he has been on the food chain for years. He lives in West Hartford, which I guess is the place of choice for people so inclined, with his wife and 5 children. Well, I guess you need that kind of money for 5 kids, and is a longtime coach with the West Hartford Youth Baseball League. A picture of Mr. Jakubowski. So the first thing you got to look at is, why are we spending so much in compensation? Now, this guy here, get another sip of tea, apparently is one who is embedded into the food chain. You're not going to get anybody to say, what you don't see and make this analysis is, does he have a background in management? Does he have a background in logistics? Does he have a background in cost accounting? Does he have a background in analysis, efficiency study? No, he doesn't have to. He is, quote unquote, a crony off the crony tree. Now, if you go to here and you look down the article, the federal budget cuts $185 billion. Now, this is the whole business of people that don't work and have no inclination to work and no inclination to volunteer. Federal government's finally saying, hey, enough out of you. You're getting cut off. And why shouldn't that be? Why should an able-bodied person not be able to do something? And you hear all kinds of excuses. Oh, they're not mentally able. Well, how do they become mentally able? They become mentally able by forcing them to do something. And, it's that or you starve. And the point being is, if you look at this here and you say, oh, this is terrible. Oh, the terrible Trump people. Doesn't anybody in the political world realize we got a big problem in this state? We are non-industrious, non-achieving, non-self-supporting, non-driving, no perspective whatsoever on how we grow things and do things and build things. We've just got to hand them more money. And it's when the money runs out, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to beg for more money. And when that money runs out, well, we're going to blame Donald Trump, who's evil. Brooke Rollins, a lady whom I like very much, praised the legislation. Through the president's leadership, the bill makes agriculture great again, bolsters the farm safety net, makes crop insurance more affordable, and protects 2 million family farms from the death tax. Now, when we look at that, these farms, 2 million of them, need help because they were largely staffed by people who can't stay in the country because they're not citizens. Now, isn't that an opportunity to go and do something and be something and learn something and save money? But to take a job on a farm, learn what real labor is like, learn how to work. But no, we don't look at that. We don't, there's a lot of Americans right now that can work in the agriculture business. They are begging for you. But the fact of the matter is, they're begging for you. You've done nothing in your life but beg. And somebody like Mr. Jakubowski and everybody there's $1 million of compensation in that organization. Now look at it this way, right? They got, what was it? How much? 9 million. 2 million of that over 2 years is going to be for executive compensation. How do you feel about that? I don't know if I like that. I mean, I have a food bank here, and nobody's paid. No one is paid, but yet these people are being paid. And the only thing they do, if you're working a food bank, and if you work the logistics of a food bank, the people on the food bank won't say this, but I will. The only thing the food shares of the world and the state and everything else does is they want statistics. They are not the least bit concerned about the welfare of the people whatsoever. They want statistics, and they will lord it over on volunteers. And there's been times when I've gotten into terrible fights, but I've won them, where they have threatened not to bring food deliveries because, my stressed out volunteer couldn't get the statistics in time. Sorry, she's feeding the starving. This is the idiocy and arrogance that you get. So the article goes on and talks about the USDA canceled other nutrition assistance programs, the local food assistance cooperative assistance program and local food for schools program that provided 5 million to Connecticut schools and food banks to purchase fresh food from local farms. Days later, the agency canceled fresh food deliveries under another program known as the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP. Now, I'm a big advocate in fresh food, but how many damn bureaucracies do you need to deliver the fresh food? Then you have a quote from policy genius and mensch and savior to us all, Joe Courtney. These cuts, along with the huge cuts to Medicaid and SNAP in the 900-page big beautiful bill, show that the Trump administration is not interested in helping families with the affordability crisis. This is the same moronic Joe Courtney who told you last week on last week's show he didn't know what was in the bill. So now I guess he either knew something or he read 900 pages in a hurry. You see what's going on here. And other states in trouble, run by liberals and demo commies, New Jersey and Massachusetts, figures, right? We'll move on. I'm especially concerned about the USDA's termination of the LFPA. That is the, let's look at that real quick. Or does the young lady explain that? I guess we're back on now. I don't find a good explanation in this article for the LFPA, but we do have a quote from Representative Andre Baumgardner, Vice Chair of the Environment Committee. he said the result would be hungrier families and fewer resources. Andre, did you ever do anything to try to consolidate the resources in Connecticut and put them to better use? He did something. He co-sponsored legislation that sought money for nutrition assistance. Not, how much do we have there and how much can we do better? And he's credited for causing more money to come. And we look at other people who are still crying the poor mouth. Hands on Hartford, person to person, and Friendly Hands Food Bank comes after a sustained trend over the past year or more of client demand exceeding expectations. Food pantry leaders say they're facing as much demand now as they did in 2020 during the peak of the pandemic. Is that not indicative of a problem? I'm not making fun of hunger. I am criticizing the increasing problem, which is continually facilitated by the lack of a solution by the so-called elected officials and administrative heads. People do face a lot of food insecurity and the food costs come up. I think it's important to stay around and be able to help, says Jenica Torres, who oversees Hands on Hartford's Choice Community Food Pantry. Seniors living on fixed income among the most affected, and the cost of food has risen. Now, Hartford has the highest food insecurity rate, our capital city. Is that not a problem to you? I mean, it's a problem to me. And the food pantry has served 1,000 households per month. It's sad. That's really sad. More from Jakubowski. We're seeing long lines as long as we were during the pandemic, but the amount of food we have to give out was back to where it was pre-pandemic. So the USDA spokesperson says statutory programs were inflated during the Biden administration without any plans for long-term solutions. And even in 2024, they used the pandemic as a reason to make funding announcements. So when everything else fails, you blame the pandemic, you blame Trump, and you try to get more money doing that. The TFAP slush fund was eliminated. The program continues to operate uninterrupted, with more than $271 million spent this year to connect families with food. The department will continue to use its procurement authority to support producers and consumers, and with 16 nutrition programs, ensure families continue to have access to affordable and abundant food. Jakubowski doesn't like that. He expects once the federal SNAP cuts come, demand on food pantries in Connecticut could rise even further. Okay, there are going to be cuts. But the question is, what is our esteemed brain trust in the Connecticut legislature doing to say, hey, we've got a problem? Should we have fewer executives in these organizations to feed the hungry? Should we cut compensation? Should we consolidate distribution? Should we buy in bigger quantities? Can we be more efficient? Can we get people from being perpetual beggars and get them into work? No, that doesn't go on in Connecticut, unfortunately. The other quotes from people, person to person down the shoreline. Courtney visited Access Community Action in Norwich, where he met with the agency staff to discuss the impact of federal cuts to nutrition assistance and preparation for the future. At a time when so many families are already struggling with the high cost of living, cutting USDA food assistance programs that help keep people fed is inexcusable, the congressman said in the statement. In other words, he couldn't say that. He'd have to have somebody write it for him. So basically, here we go. We're here. Same problems. The food pantries are bracing for cuts, but yet the people in Connecticut aren't doing what they need to do in order to say, hey, the same stupid way of doing things will no longer suffice. We have to change things. We have to do things. We have to get new models. We have to get new consolidations. We've got to get less chiefs and more Indians. Pardon the term, not meaning to insult anybody, but there are such things as Indian chiefs and Indians. You know what I mean. And it's a simple management analogy. However, do nothing about the over-the-top compensation of these organizations. And always, 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 when you're going to run these things, you're going to get people who are connected to the state and have connections to Obama. That's basically it. So the more you continue to fund in Connecticut, let's stop the share. The more you continue to fund in Connecticut, any problem, be it drugs, be it hunger, be it, you name it, addiction, you've got more addicted, you've got more hungry, and you've got more screwing up. Gambling's another one. Why is that? Why is that? You know, we add the bureaucrats, we spend the money, and things get worse. Now, there is a very simple solution to fixing hunger in Connecticut, but we do not have the guts in this state to confront it. Look at it this way. If you were going to fix something, what you would do is you'd fix it. You know, you don't hire more people. You know, your car's broken down. You're not going to hire more mechanics to assess the problem. And when that doesn't work, you're going to hire more mechanics. Pretty soon you're going to have all these mechanics and nobody's going to be able to get near the hood or the chassis. So, but that's what Connecticut does. However, my solution, which I gave to a committee of Republicans 10 years ago, Leonard Fasano, Tony Guglielmo, and several others, is have a direct tax credit in Connecticut, write off your income taxes for a contribution to the food bank of your choice, not food share. What if I don't want to give to food share? What if I don't want to feed Jakubowski's close to $400,000 salary in an organization where really we didn't look at it, but the expenses are greater than the income? What if I want to feed my little food bank and I'd rather pay my quote unquote tax money to that to feed the hungry and actually deliver money to resources? But Connecticut would never do that. A direct tax credit, bang, over, done. Up to 25% of your income taxes. Doesn't cost you a thing. Do you think anybody in Connecticut has the wherewithal, the vision, the courage, the sense of logistics to adopt something like that? I mean, why can't it work? Why do we need all these layers of bureaucracy, ineptitude, crony feeding, food chains, and people stepping over each other to do things? That is one way. That is just one way where, you know, someone who comes, a politician, and says, I cut the budget, but look at what I did. I gave you a tax credit and I'm saving you that money. And not only that, but I'm going to lower your taxes by doing more of that. Then you get people's attention. But the problem is they are like narcotic addicts with money. When you take the money away from them, there's withdrawal. Their vision, their perspective, their knowledge, their scope of events doesn't get that far. And it ain't hard. It ain't hard stuff. Look at it this way. If you had a direct credit to a food bank, you could go to the markets and you could say to the markets, look, if the food bank in the area buys in bulk, give them a break. Give them a break. You're going to make it back. You're going to make it back in quantity. It's simple beans, simple logistics, but it's Connecticut. And Connecticut likes screw ups so they can continue to hold press conferences and tell you that they care about you and tell you how bad Donald Trump is and tell you how wonderful they are when they are kicking your behind and they're sticking you in the eyes and they're ruining your life from day to day, because the more they ruin the more they ruin your life, the more their presence is needed to help you ruin your life even further. It's got to change. And we'll be changing some things up here. It's Tony D'Angelo here on 30 with Tony. We'll be back with the next segment right after this. Thanks, Kimasabis. Thanks for staying with us. Over the course of this week and over the course of the weekend, I really started, had a number of things I had to do, a number of things that were, things on the calendar, commitments, work commitments and things like that. And I finally had a moment to stop and think about where we are headed as a state, as a country, as a competitive entity, if you will. And when I did that, I started to think about one thing. And what I started to think about was the people in power who want to tell you something different, if they even know what they're telling you themselves, will always try to keep you from the most obvious truth that is in front of your face. It's like, no, we can't do that. And there is a war on truth. If you don't believe me, go back. You don't even have to go back as far as the origins of, or shall we say, the public rollout of the COVID-19 attempted communist takeover. I'm going back before that, but there's a war on truth, because truth essentially takes the narrative that people want to tell you, and many times and oftentimes blows it into smithereens, blows it into nothing. And where I started to really think about it over the weekend and into the course of this week, and, as we went forward, I started to ask myself, since there is such a war on truth, since there are so many people all over government lying to protect their kingdom and wanting to tell you you're crazy and you don't know what you're talking about and you're some sort of a fringe numbskull, after all, because they are the legitimate media and the legitimate political system. There's so much of that. And where it's so troubling, they can think whatever in the hell they want. Who really cares what they think anyway? I mean, half of them can't think, the other half can think, and when they're thinking, they're trying to think about how they can best protect themselves without any regard for you. But that all said, the fact that there is so much of a shortage and so much of a paucity, SAT word, of fact is so devastating when the rubber meets the road, or if you prefer, when the blank meets the fan. I kind of like when the rubber meets the road. It's more polite, but that's just me. That all said, I began to look at our pitiful state of Connecticut, and with everything going back and forth, with all the problems, crime, corruption, lack of economy, this housing crisis that we don't even know really exists, because our homeless counts are incredibly low. People are living somewhere. Read the Bob Swick article again this past Saturday. And with all of this mess happening, and businesses closing and restaurants closing, and our schools are a mess, and our kids aren't being taught, and their places of advocacy and liberalism and touchy-feely nonsense. Does anybody in government, this is the question that I'm asking myself, does anybody in government have any sense whatsoever, and I'm talking Democrat, Republican, I don't see anybody personally, have any sense about the time bomb economically and socially that will be facing this state unless people get more intelligent by the hurry? And to the point where I say now to people, I'm not even looking at politicians. I'm saying now to people, protect yourself. Do what you need to do to protect yourself, to ensure your own means of livelihood, because these idiots will screw it up for you, regardless of the intention of their heart. And I don't think that there's anybody, I will make this statement, I don't think there's anybody in government, any candidate, any party member who understands what is necessary for purposes of an economy. Oh, they understand budgets. They understand budgets because that's how they get funded. And they understand taxation because they understand revenues. They may not understand good taxation or what would be taxation where a government can grow to facilitate the needs of its people, who in turn can pay back to the government as they're building things. They understand none of that. But this struck me with the seriousness of what we're about to face very, very, very soon. They don't care. They honestly, truthfully don't care. How many times will you find Ned Lamont and Susie B., or Lieutenant Governor Susan Beisowitz, sitting over someplace, with a pizza or an ice cream cone? I mean, who cares? Eat 3 ice cream cones. Get an ice cream cone and jam it in the other's face. I really don't care. That's not governance. That's not quote unquote fiduciary responsibility. That's just patented stupidity, appealing to the lowest common denominator, of which you want the lowest common denominator because you can bribe them into voting for you. That's how pathetic you are. But I submit unto you, before what I'm about to show you today, that even the so-called economic people in this state are probably maybe a little bit better or just as bad as the people in politics, not seeing what really is happening out there. And you know something? For this particular segment, I'm going to lay off the Department of Economic and Community Development because, number one, I've said a lot about that. Number two, if you're a politician and you still look at this department to do something positively economically, you're a joke, you're a farce, you're a fool. I want nothing to do with you, because how can something continue to receive money and do nothing for all the years of its existence other than quote unquote consume money and drive us into further debt and cause frauds and pilferings along the way? How do you want me to believe you? How can I believe you? Ask yourself that. Again, it's the simple questions that they don't want you to ask. But let's throw a couple of things up here on the board, if you don't mind. And I'd like for you, for a moment, just going to get a sip of tea as you're assimilating that. Where would I be without my tea? The Connecticut Business and Industry Association, Connecticut Business and Industry Association, CBIA. This is an organization that, from what I understand, is in place to, quote unquote, make Connecticut or help make Connecticut a better place to do business and to develop the Connecticut economy. Well, don't we have advanced CT for that? Isn't that what advanced CT is supposed to be? Is there any purpose in advanced CT, whatever goes on there? We've looked at them time and time again. We will in the future. Is there any purpose in what they are doing as far as what would beneficially help me or you economically, socially? Is there a reason why the dealings of advanced CT are under lock and key and cloak and dagger, and the governor's involved with certain heads of state and heads of Eversource like Gregory Butler? is there any reason, or the emphasis guy, or whosoever, that's really good, transparent, honest development? So for this particular segment, I'm going to lay off Advanced CT. I'm going to lay off the Department of Economic and Community Development. I want to focus on this perception here. This is a business leaders group, the CBIA. They are quoting a story or referring a story now, July 10th of 2025. That's not that long ago. Connecticut's now, according to the CNBC survey, in the top half of the lower echelon in this survey that CNBC did. I'll blow this up a little bit for you. And let me just do that here. The annual competitiveness study. Now, no stuff, Sherlock. The people taking this survey in Connecticut are, those gainfully employed, probably in Fairfield County, maybe along the Eastern Shore or something like that, who are largely dependent upon the economic systems of the state, which of course are largely state-driven and state-run, regardless of the survey, okay? Because basically, you can quantify surveys like this, unless they really tilt one way. A rich man and two poor men, or average men, go out to lunch. The rich man gets up and goes to the washroom. The collective net worth of the table remaining is a fraction of what's there. So, take surveys for what they're worth. Interesting, though, when I do a survey or anybody does a survey on, do you think Ned Lamont is doing a good job on Twitter, or Chris Murphy? It's always like 99-1 against. And I mean, that is, quote unquote, what's really happening. So that said, I want you to look at something here. They go on, they comment about the survey. And they give you the numbers, and it's a neat little article. I want you to look at this quote by Chris DiPentima, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who was encouraged by being in the top half of the bottom part of this survey. And he says, it emphasized the state's highly skilled, highly educated workforce and the efforts employers are taking to attract and retain employees. Take that at face value for a moment. We have a great quality of life. We have an incredible education system, and we have one of the most productive workforces in the world. Take that at face value right at the moment. We've just got to bring down the cost of living and doing business so we could see more growth in this state. Take that at face value. With more growth comes more state revenues. With more state revenues comes more investments. And then you end up with a positive cycle of growth and opportunity. Now, in that whole passage or paragraph, I don't disagree as such with his comment on how things work, other than the fact of, this is the patent line, highly skilled and highly educated workforce and efforts employers are taking to attract and retain employees. Yeah, listen, when your economic landscape is so rotten and somebody looks where they could get more for doing nothing as opposed to what you can afford to pay them because of the way the state dogs out on you, if you are a small business person, you do a lot trying to keep the help you need. Now, I'm not going to pick at the survey or say what's bad or what's good. Take the survey for what it is. But I want you to look at what Mr. DiPentima said. A great quality of life. It's a good thing to have. An incredible education system, regardless of your opinion. It's a good thing to have. And lower costs of living. It's a good thing to have. And more growth comes more revenues, and more revenues comes more investments, and you end up with a positive cycle of growth and opportunity. Nothing is wrong with those statements. But what I ask myself, with anybody in politics, with anybody rumored to run in politics, with anybody who wants to be a governor, do they have a clue of what's happening out there? This man does. This man's name is Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon is the chief executive officer of JPM Chase Bank. I don't know if they are the largest bank in the United States, but they're certainly, either they or Bank of America. They're still like number one or number two. And there is a place in the world for the JPMs and the Bank of America, frankly. For what I do as daily work, those are the people I need because they have the resources that I need for me to do what I do. The Hachi Pachi bank down the street can't do it for me, does not have the brain power, does not have the technology, does not have the intellectual candle power to do what I need. Not that what I need is rocket science, but they're all good, the little banks, for the normal stuff, your car loan, your passbook. You want to buy a mutual fund? I'm sort of I wish that part of Glass-Steagall was never repealed. You don't need a 20-year-old girl trying to sell you a mutual fund, but they're fine for what they do. But we need the big banks because the big banks have the resources. Even though I use them, I use the resources. I fight with them often. They know my name. I have very good friends, and I have people that don't care for me much, but, I'm out to get the best I can, for my clients and the best thing that, can happen here. And some of my best relationships in the world are the people and the families and the trading groups whom I've known for years and years and years who are tied to these big banks. Anyway, here is a businessman Democrat, okay? This is a guy who's not a Trump fan, was never a Trump lover. He is a street guy from Queens, New York, and built his way through the bank and understands, and this is what I like to call, he is, quote unquote, a sane Democrat. And you know something? We don't have sane Democrats anymore. Bill Bradley in New Jersey, probably number 2 or number 3 on my all-time favorite elected official list, was a sane Democrat. Didn't do everything perfectly, but knew what he had to do in order to make the state competitive, and he did. He was also a big part in tax reform going back to the Reagan days. Michael Bloomberg, in his first term, was a magnificent mayor, was a magnificent logistical genius until his, quote unquote, people that were looking at his empire said, hey, Mike, you're getting a little too far afield with this stop and frisk stuff. And then he became this twisted, woke idiot, which is unfortunate because a man like a Bloomberg could do a lot of good if he's in the right mind. Well, here's a guy like Dimon. And Dimon's saying people like these people who are these rich liberals have big hearts and little brains. I don't know if they have hearts, Mr. Dimon, but let's continue. What is he saying? He went to Dublin, Ireland, and this is a guy about a year and a half ago that terrorized the finance conference in Davos, Switzerland, by saying Trump was right about the border. Trump was right about the making America great again. And you people sat there and made it difficult for him, and they were horrified. They couldn't deal with it. So Dimon goes on, I have a lot of friends who are Democrats and they're idiots. I often say they have big heart and always say they have big hearts and little brains. They do not understand how the real world works. Almost every single policy rolled out failed. CBIA, do you understand how the real world works? Do you understand real economics? Connecticut state legislature, do you understand the least bit about real economics? Connecticut aspirants for governor, do you have a freaking clue as to what causes real economics? Housing project in New Britain, right? That's real economics. A bunch of people go and they build it. Things hung out on debt. Bunch of people come in. A number of them can't pay the rent. Here come the subsidies. Here come the slums. Here come the needles. Here come the bullets. That's real economic development, right? But they're all cheering there and they all say it's wonderful. Again, read the Bob Swick article this past week. Now, what I'd like you to focus on, Diamond has particularly zeroed in on issues as he saw it anti-business or impractical. He's criticized the party's focus on social issues, arguing that such narratives were misleading and not reflective of economic realities. And he's offered praise to the policies of Donald Trump. You see, this man here, he's about the money. He could care if Mickey Mouse were the governor. He could care if Superman were the president. And then again, what if Mickey Mouse were the governor and he were doing the right things in order to do governance? I mean, who cares about the personality of the person? What if Superman were the president? You know, this guy's got that part, among others, right. Now, guess what? He also took a torch to DEI and his bank. He said, this is nonsense, basically. This is costing us money. And he says here, we all were devoted to reaching out to the Black community, Hispanic, the LGBT community, the disabled. We do all that. But to the extent they've got to stop it and they've got to go back to being more practical. They're very ideological. Ideals that aren't based on principles don't get you anything other than behind and broke. Now, here's the critical thing. Zoran Mandami, Diamond, who's the head of a bank, says he's more of a Marxist than a socialist. And he yelled about Mandami. And he says they're not serious. They're in the same ideological mush that means nothing in the real world. What is the CBIA in? What is the Connecticut government in? Ideological mush. I could use another four-letter word beginning with S, but I need not spell that out for you. This guy's saying, don't believe Tony D'Angelo, okay? You know, call Tony D'Angelo any name you want in the book. But this guy here is the head of JPM Chase, and he's saying, you are garbage. You are nonsense. You understand nothing. Now, he then criticized the Biden administration for lacking business expertise, saying that former President Joe Biden didn't have one business person advising him and expressing disbelief at the administration's lack of knowledge. These echoed comments Diamond made throughout Biden's tenure that he wasn't sold on Bidenomics. And also goes on to talk about DEI and reflecting a broader trend to scale back DEI language and programs in the wake of legal and political shifts. At the same time, he rebranded DEI to DOI, diversity, opportunity, and exclusion. See, that's the difference. And when you look at that here, does Connecticut have one business person? One real business person understanding what you need to do to grow an economy? I haven't seen one. I know there's none running. I know there's not one in the legislature. I don't think there's been one. Probably, I don't even remember. We have a number of career politicians, but the reduction of mandatory training, we're not going to seminars anymore. These things are there for you if you want them, but we're getting rid of them. And he is following what Donald Trump is saying. He's following the law. Yeah, he's about the money, but yet he's seeing that what was done doesn't work. And let's just see how much more we've got here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going down. You can read this article if you like. It is in Fortune magazine, and it was July 11, 2025. Good article. I just want to see if there's anything that might be of interest. Look at that. He preferred Nikki Haley over Donald Trump and apparently was reported to privately support Kamala Harris over Trump. Now, the goes to show you where the man is. And where the man is regardless of how I feel, what I need to do in my role in this bank is I need to know what works. And what's going on right now in this world, in the Zoran Mandami world, is garbage, does not work, is nonsense, will drive all the business out of New York, will make this thing so bad that it will be unrecognizable. So, it just goes to show you, we're beyond the fact of having intelligent disagreements on policy and sharing back and forth. But what we now do is we need to capitulate everything to the lowest common denominator and go to a Marxist model because capitalism hasn't worked. That's what's happening here. Now, to jump back here to CBIA, they put a lot of effort in this article. They're supposedly the July 10th. They're supposedly the, manufacturing cheerleader of the state of Connecticut. Do I see one word on their site? Let's have a little fun. We talked, I believe it was last week on the Lee Elsey show and on this show about the One Big Beautiful Bill and the incredible boost that is in that bill with opportunity zones and 1 year expensing for businesses. Now, you would think, again, look at what Mr. Diamond's saying. We need economics. We need we don't need idiocy. We need things that will work fundamentally so we can grow. But you would think over here with the CBIA, when we're talking about a 1 year business building write-off under the One Big Beautiful Bill and all of the domestic manufacturing incentives that are there, which are dynamite, and the opportunity zones. This would be tailor-made for economic development. But when they put a lot of time into this article here, let's go over here. Let's see if they have anything here on One Big Beautiful Bill. Actually, I didn't. They cover the tax changes. Let's see if they mention anything about manufacturing. Again, this is live television. Nothing on the One Big Beautiful Bill where you could have a huge campaign devoted to that, which would get this state, that and a sane tax policy, would get the state in the right footing, but they all have a varying degree of TDS. Let's see what they do say about manufacturing. What would it take to reshore U.S. manufacturing? And nothing current, nothing really happening. Actually, some of the stuff goes back a little bit. Some academic articles and things like that. And what I want to know here is, why aren't we talking about the expansion of the opportunity zones? Here's an article. Let's look at this here. I'm going to go there. They mention the Qualified Opportunity Zone program, but they don't mention the expansion of it. They don't mention the fact that it can lead to rental housing. And they also don't mention the fact that there's a lot more in Connecticut that qualifies for the Qualified Opportunity Zone. So they are hitting the surface, but they're not getting to the grit of it. And that's really the whole thing. why can't you get to the grid of it? You can't get to the grid of it because you've got to start agreeing with Donald Trump and his economic policies. This man here has done that. And this man here sees the threat of this man here. This group here wants to play along with that because the party in power likes what this man is doing and wants to, quote unquote, do whatever it can do to stay in power. That's basically it. And what I'll stop the share here, but let me just, before I'll do that, I'll review the CBIA. If I can get back to where I was, the CBIA survey, which puts Connecticut, actually the CNBC survey, which puts Connecticut in the bottom or the top part of the lowest states, not looking at the economic issues that face this state, not looking at, quote unquote, the issues in this state that really stop economic growth. And what would help Connecticut are things like opportunity zones and things like investment credits and things like making it better and making it more well-known to small business people to utilize what is there under the One Big Beautiful Bill. There's nothing about manufacturing. There's nothing about the one-year write-off. There's nothing about the qualified opportunity zones in any length, and how this can be something that would be incredibly useful whatsoever, because Connecticut doesn't want that. Connecticut does not want to see private development come in and have people become independent, because it obviates the need for government. Now, and Connecticut likes government because that's what keeps people employed. Now, here's Diamond, the CEO of JPM Chase Bank, that says this whole liberal ideology thing is big hearts and little brains. This is the kind of crap which is going to drive us into the sewer. And when we start flirting around with a Mondami and, a government-run grocery stores and rent control and all this other stuff, we are talking the collapse of any sort of economy whatsoever. And I'll stop the share on that. It is high time for our legislature, our legislators, the CBIA, the DECD, Advanced CT, Mother Mary, and all the ships at sea, to understand that Connecticut is on the brink of a major economic disaster, to where there won't be enough taxpayers due to outmigration to pay the ridiculous salaries of the people who are in government and the people who are in nonprofit, to effectively give us ideals, to effectively give us, pipe dreams, like e-cars and, e-car mandates and wind power and things like that, for the sake of all of that. And just keep driving taxes up and up and up, to where Connecticut's not going to be useful to anybody anymore until we get people understanding solid economic principles that make that their job one. When you do that, then you'll have people defending their capital. You're not going to need government. A small business person, can defend his business because that's his livelihood. And he will, believe me, a lot better than the public sector will, because he's there and they're not at the moment of need. And they understand that. If you've been in business for any amount of time and you've succeeded, you know what it took to get there, and you didn't count on your government to do it for you. So I just don't, they're just not seeing it. They're just not getting it. And I don't know if they will get it, but what I want you to do, voter, viewer, listener, is to hold them accountable for this and let them publicly state what they don't know. So we can get them, we can throw them up on the board and show that they're not going to have the juice, the gumption, the guts, the guile, or the goodness to be anything necessary in taking Connecticut out of this economic, socio-economico, politico, rigid, I can't even say my own word, religioso, probinistico sewer. It's Tony D'Angelo here on 30 with Tony. We're back with the rest of the show. The fun part right after this.
HMO Sobbies. It's the Trickster. It's time for a 30 with Tony classic movie review. And here's Tony.
Well, thanks, Keeman Sobbies. Thanks for staying with us. I watched this movie that I'm about to show you a review on, or do a review for you, called A Walk in the Spring Rain. It was made in 1970. The stars we will review Ingrid Bergman and Anthony Quinn, two of Hollywood's greats. I was thinking I was going to get a real Ingrid Bergman and Anthony Quinn performance, but in this movie it was different. And I kind of walked away and I said, ugh, I don't know, kind of a sappy movie. I sort of watched it and then I was expecting things to happen, but they never did. And I was really disappointed. I thought, like, that was 2 hours out of my life. I'll never get back. But as I discussed this movie with others, they were telling me some of the subtleties and the nuances in this movie that I did not see. And as I thought about it, I said, those are very relatable things for me, albeit in somewhat of a different fashion than how I would relate to a movie ordinarily. But let me show you the review, the article rather from Wikipedia. The movie is A Walk in the Spring Rain. It was a 1970 film, was made by Columbia, and it has a sort of a midlife crisis theme to it. The Ingrid Bergman character is a lovely, talented, gorgeous woman. I mean, that was Ingrid Bergman. And her husband, who was played by this longtime character actor, Fritz Weaver, you've seen him in various films, is a law professor who wants to write a book on the Constitution. And he can't do it with his academic court work and academic course load and living in the city and that sort of thing. So they rent a house in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. And in this, they come into a different form of life as city slickers. The most interesting thing in the movie is Ingrid Bergman's character, Libby Meredith, runs into a character called Will Kane, another Will Kane, Will Cade, and his part is played by the great Anthony Quinn, a familiar face in movies. And it is a very masculine role, but yet Anthony Quinn plays a Southerner and plays sort of a Southern guy without a lot of sophistication. And here she is. She is the wife of a law professor. And there is a part in her that her current life does not allow her to deal with or get out. So this couple starts to relate to what's happening in Tennessee and deal with the vicissitudes of their own life. And it's a lot of tension, a lot of, shall I say, questions between the spouses as to who are we? What are we doing here? Don't we all ask those questions? I ask those questions constantly. I was asking those questions to myself last week, wondering, why, how, how does it continue? And it is a, shall I say, a good period piece because it puts you in that situation, which I find myself in often, as to what if I did a certain thing? How would it have come out? How would this be? How would that be? And this movie doesn't exactly do that, but it does put Ingrid Bergman's character, Libby Meredith, in a situation where she as a woman has never had feelings that have been evoked by her, her husband. But yet somehow when she gets with Anthony Quinn, it is this incredible dynamite that she herself cannot figure out what is happening. And there's a whole lot of psychological things and guilt. And I'm not going to spoil that for you, but it's really an interesting dynamic because can a person come out of one environment into another and find out something entirely different about themselves that they did not imagine. So I am not going to tell you anything else because I think I would give away the movie. The movie is available for free on YouTube from what I can see. The film is A Walk in the Spring Rain. It was a Rachel Maddox 1966 novel starring Anthony Quinn, very famous, noted actor to you all, and Ingrid Bergman, and a Hollywood legend. And you've got to see it. You've got to take it for what it is. And perhaps in watching this movie, you will see things in yourself that you never saw before. So it's A Walk in the Spring Rain, 1970. Let's look at the trailer in those jurisdictions where the trailer is allowed to be played. Well, thanks, Kemosabe's. Thanks for staying with us, and I've got a story for you. A priest, a minister, and a rabbi and a duck walk into the bar. The rabbi puts the duck up on the bar, and the bartender says, "Hey guys, what is this? A joke?" It'll catch you in a little bit. It's Tony D'Angelo here on 30 with Tony. Thanks, Kemosabe's. Thanks for being with us. See you next week for an even greater show. Also, see me and listen to me on the Lee Elsey Show, Tuesdays, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 94.9 WJJF, and occasional snippets on Patriot TV. Take care. God bless you. Have a great day.